Have you ever found yourself saying, "I'm sorry" for things that don't really need an apology? Maybe you apologized for asking a question, taking up space, or even just existing in a room. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Today, we're going to talk about something so many of us do without even thinking, apologizing when we don't need to, and why it's time to reclaim your confidence and own your worth after 65. You see, as we get older, it's easy to fall into habits that dim our light. We might feel like we're too much or not enough, too slow, too quiet, too opinionated. But here's the truth. Every single one of us has earned a right to take up space, to speak up, and to live unapologetically. So let's dive into why saying "I'm sorry" might be holding you back, and how to replace those words with something far more powerful. Let's start with the first step, recognizing unnecessary apologies. Think about your day. Did you apologize for needing help carrying groceries? For wanting to share a story? For simply existing in a conversation? Many of us were raised to be polite, to avoid rocking the boat. But over-apologizing can quietly chip away at our self-esteem. It sends a message to others and to ourselves that we're a burden. Here's a little exercise. For the next 24 hours, keep a mental tally of every time you say, "I'm sorry." Write it down if you can. You might be shocked at how often it happens. The goal isn't to judge yourself. It's to become aware. Because once you see the pattern, you can start to change it. Now, let's talk about what to do instead. Let's say you're at the doctor's office and you need to ask a question. Instead of starting with, "Sorry to bother you," try, "I'd like to understand this better." See the difference? One shrinks you. The other holds space for your needs. It might feel awkward at first, like breaking in a new pair of shoes, but with practice, it becomes second nature. And here's the beautiful part. When you stop apologizing for the small stuff, you create room for confidence to grow. You start to believe, deep down, that your voice matters, that your presence matters, because it does. Now, let's move to the second step, replacing apologies with gratitude or clarity. Imagine this. You're running a few minutes late to meet a friend. Old habit. "I'm so sorry I kept you waiting." New approach. "Thank you for your patience." Suddenly, the energy shifts. Instead of framing yourself as a problem, you're acknowledging their kindness. Or maybe you disagree with someone. Instead of, "Sorry, but I think," try, "I see it differently. Here's why." No guilt, no hesitation, just clear, respectful communication. This isn't about being rude. It's about standing firm in your perspective. I'll never forget a conversation I had with my granddaughter a few years back. She said, "Grandma, why do you always say sorry for telling stories about the past?" I love hearing them. It hit me. My apologies were teaching her that my experiences weren't valuable. So I stopped. And you know what? Our conversations became richer for both of us. Now, I know this isn't easy. These habits took decades to build, and they won't vanish overnight. But every time you choose confidence over apology, you're telling the world and yourself that you're worth respecting. And that's a message worth repeating. We've covered the first two steps, recognizing unnecessary apologies and replacing them with gratitude or clarity. But there's more to explore, ways to set boundaries without guilt and celebrate your worth every single day. So let's keep this conversation going, because you deserve to step into your power unapologetically and with pride. Take a moment today to notice where "I'm sorry" sneaks into your life. And when it does, ask yourself, is this apology truly needed? Or is it time to try something new? You've got this. And I'll be right here, cheering you on every step of the way. You know, one of the most powerful lessons I've learned over the years is that saying no can be one of the kindest things you'll ever do for yourself and for others. But so many of us, especially as we get older, feel this pressure to say yes to everything, to family, to friends, even to strangers. We say yes out of guilt, out of obligation, or because we're afraid of seeming difficult. But today, let's talk about the third step, setting boundaries without guilt. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you canceled plans because you were tired, only to spend the rest of the day apologizing to everyone? Or agreed to babysit the grandkids even though your arthritis was flaring up? We do these things because we love the people in our lives, but here's the truth. You can't pour from an empty cup. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's an act of self-respect. Here's how to start. Let's say your neighbor asks you to volunteer for a committee, but your schedule's already full. Instead of, "I'm so sorry, I just can't this time," try, "I appreciate you thinking of me, but I need to focus on my priorities right now." No apologies, just clarity. It might feel uncomfortable at first, but think of it like building a muscle. The more you practice, the stronger you get. And here's a secret. People respect boundaries more than we think. A few years ago, my son asked me to host Thanksgiving dinner, but I was recovering from surgery. Instead of pushing through and apologizing for letting everyone down, I said, "I'd love to celebrate together, but let's try a potluck this year. I'll handle the pie." And guess what? Everyone stepped up. The meal was delicious, and I got to enjoy the day instead of stressing. Boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges to healthier relationships. They teach others how to treat you, and they remind you that your time, energy, and well-being matter. So the next time you're tempted to say yes when your heart says no, pause, take a breath, and remember, a respectful no is better than a resentful yes. Now, let's move to the fourth step, and this one's my favorite, celebrating your worth every single day. How often do you pause to acknowledge how far you've come, the challenges you've overcome, the wisdom you've earned? If you're like most of us, probably not enough. Here's a little experiment. Tonight, before bed, write down one thing you did today that made you proud. Maybe you stood up for yourself in a conversation. Maybe you finally said no to that thing you didn't want to do. Or maybe you simply got out of bed and faced the day with courage. Those moments matter. They're proof of your strength. Let me share a story. A dear friend of mine, Martha, spent years apologizing for her hearing loss. She'd say, "Sorry, could you repeat that?" with a nervous laugh, as if her needs were an inconvenience. Then one day, she decided to reframe it. She started saying, "I'd love to hear you better. Could you speak a little louder?" No apology, just a clear request. And over time, she noticed something amazing. People didn't mind. In fact, they admired her confidence. That's the power of celebrating your worth. When you stop minimizing your needs and start owning your value, the world meets you halfway. So here's your challenge. For the next week, start each morning by looking in the mirror and saying, "I am enough." Sounds simple, right? But those 3 words can shift your entire mindset. And don't stop there. Celebrate the small victories. Did you speak up at a family gathering? That's worth a quiet well done. Did you take a walk even when you didn't feel like it? Give yourself credit. These acts of self-recognition are like seeds. Water them, and they'll grow into unshakable confidence. Here's the thing. Life after 65 isn't about fading into the background. It's about stepping into the spotlight of your own story. Flaws, triumphs, and all. Every time you set a boundary, every time you choose gratitude over apology, every time you celebrate your worth, you're telling the world, I am here, I matter, and I'm not done yet. But this journey isn't just about stopping old habits. It's about starting new ones. It's about filling your life with the kind of joy and purpose that leaves no room for unnecessary I'm sorries. And trust me, that's a journey worth taking. So today, I want you to ask yourself, what's one boundary you need to set? What's one victory you need to celebrate? Write it down. Say it out loud. Share it with someone you trust. Because the more you own your worth, the more the world will reflect it back to you. And remember, you've spent decades caring for others. Now, it's your turn. Let's make the next chapter the boldest one yet. You know, I used to think confidence was something you were born with, a trait reserved for the loudest voices in the room. But over the years, I've learned something far more beautiful. Confidence is a choice, a daily practice, a decision to stop shrinking and start shining, no matter your age. And that's what this journey is all about, choosing to stand tall in your worth, one unapologetic step at a time. Let's tie this all together. We've talked about recognizing unnecessary apologies, replacing them with gratitude or clarity, setting boundaries, and celebrating your worth. Now, let's talk about the ripple effect, how owning your confidence doesn't just change you. It changes everything around you. Imagine this. You're at a family gathering and someone makes a comment about how much you've slowed down. Instead of laughing it off or saying, sorry, I guess I'm just old, you smile and say, I've earned every bit of this pace and I've got stories to prove it. Suddenly, the room shifts. They see you differently because you see yourself differently. That's the power of unapologetic confidence. And here's the truth. People will treat you exactly how you teach them to. If you apologize for existing, they'll assume you're someone to overlook. But if you stand firm in your worth, they'll lean in. They'll listen. Because you've shown them you're worth listening to. I'll never forget the first time I tried this. I was at a community meeting, and I'd always been the quiet one in the back. But that day, instead of starting with, sorry if this is a dumb idea, I said, here's what I think we should do. And you know what happened? The room went silent. Not because my idea was perfect, it wasn't, but because I'd owned it. And by the end of the meeting, they'd voted to try my suggestion. That moment taught me, our words have power, but only when we stop apologizing for them. Now, I won't pretend this is easy. Some days old habits creep back in. You might catch yourself saying sorry for the weather or the traffic or simply taking up space. But here's the good news. Every moment is a chance to begin again, to say no more, to choose confidence over apology. So let's make a pact, you and I. Let's promise to stop apologizing for taking our time, because rushing is overrated, asking questions, because curiosity keeps us young, changing our minds, because growth has no age limit, prioritizing ourselves, because we've earned that right. This isn't about perfection. It's about progress. One small, brave choice at a time. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with this. You are not a footnote in someone else's story. You are the author of your own. And every time you silence an unnecessary "I'm sorry," you write a new line, one that says, "I am here, I am enough, and I refuse to dim my light for anyone." So go ahead. Take up space. Speak your truth. Set those boundaries. Celebrate your wins, big and small. And when doubt whispers, "Who do you think you are?" answer it with, "Someone who's still becoming." And to everyone watching, I'd love to hear from you. What's one thing you'll stop apologizing for this week? Share it in the comments below. Let's inspire each other. If this video resonated with you, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Together, let's make sure the world hears what we have to say. Thank you for being here, for showing up, for daring to own your worth. Remember, the best chapters aren't behind you. They're waiting to be written. Now go write them unapologetically.